Welcome to the podcast, Matt. It's absolutely fantastic to have you on.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to talk about these interesting topics. Usually I'm talking about YouTube, so to do something like this is really good. Really excited.
Good. Glad to hear it. So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What is your money story?
Okay, so I don't know how you usually do this. I could give you like the quick version and then maybe we can go into some details about it. But my money story is I come from a working class council estate background. And so probably for the first 10 or 11 years, my mum was in a relatively stable relationship. So I thought at the time, and money was it was a fairly stable environment. We didn't have loads of money. We didn't have no money. As it turns out, my mum was beaten up a little bit. So play it down there. She was beaten up by her husband at the time, his second husband. And she left. She had an affair and left with somebody else who that later became the third husband. And when that happened, we started to move. There was like a period of probably about 3 to 5 years where we moved house around 20 times. So I think by the time I was 16, it worked out about 25, 30 times I'd moved house.
Wow.
But the majority of them were between 11 and 16. So we were constantly moving from house to house, had no money. She was claiming benefits at the time. She would spend the rent money she was getting on fags or whatever it was that she was, drinking, all that kind of stuff at the time. And so we wouldn't pay the rent. So we had debt collectors come around at that time. And I remember one of my early memories is just the whole family outside because they wanted to kick us out of the house, not too far from where I live now, actually, because my mum had not paid the rent. At least that's the impression I got at the time. And then I kind of followed that through in my own life. My mum moved out when I was 16. She left me and my brother in a house on our own. And the way she described, the way I was taught was you could just get away with, moving into a house, getting electricity after 6 months, leaving that house, not paying any for any of that electricity, and moving to another house, and they would just chase you for it, and nobody would ever really know. Or you could get a credit card, spend all the money on the credit card, and just not pay it back, and just keep moving house. It was kind of like it feels like almost like that's just how life is. That's just how people like us live. And then when I got to about 20. Somewhere between like 23, 25, I went from a job where I was earning maybe 20 grand a year. I moved to a job that was about 30 grand a year. And then from that job, I went from 30 grand to 120 grand a year, almost overnight. And suddenly I was able to pay all my bills on time. And then I realized that story that I'd had before of spending the money and not paying it back, actually, when I wanted to get a house, I had to wait for 6 years until I had a CCJ. Didn't know what a CCJ was really, what I got it for, how to get rid of it or anything like that. But it meant I couldn't get a mortgage then for 6 years, and we had to wait for a long time. I had all this money that I'd not had before, and then I couldn't get a house because of my previous lives. The previous education I got around money, I guess, is the main thing. So and that is the short version, I think.
And the money story, the financial literacy lessons your mum gave you were the antithesis of what most children need to learn.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly. How has that early lack of the right education, how has that impacted you beyond having to wait for the ability to apply for a mortgage?
Well, the funny thing is, I met my wife when I was, we've been together 18 years now. I'm almost 40, 22. I was 22 years old, 21, 22 years old. And my wife was from the same sort of area as I was. We were both council estate kids, working class kids. but her parents had been together for the entire time. As long as she can remember, they'd lived in one house as long as she could remember, and they'd always paid their bills on time. And so when she met me, it must have been like a baptism of fire, because I was just like, let's do this, let's dodge this, let's not bother paying this. And she's like, hold on a minute, Matt, like, this is not how we live. This is not how you should do things. And so I think actually that created a whole, well, I would probably say she had the most influence on me starting to learn what it was like to pay bills properly. But it was definitely difficult, because in my mind, that was just normal and that's how people lived. And so why was this person who I just met, who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, telling me that I shouldn't do things like that? And I'm a born rebel, right? So I didn't want to listen to this. Who is this woman? Why is she telling me what to do? But in fact, actually what she was doing was teaching me that this is how you should live, and this is the good lessons that she'd been taught by her parents.
And I suppose with regards to your mum, how she was with money was how she had probably been taught to be with money.
No, not at all. Not at all. So her parents they lived in the same house for all their lives. They worked all their lives till my granddad died. He was working till, months before he got cancer. But and my nan worked all that time as well. They both had great pensions. My mum went to a grammar school. I don't know what kind of grammar school, but it was a grammar school still. So she had a good education, good parents. Somewhere along the way, this was just the way that she decided is how she was going to live. And I don't know if she made a conscious decision, or if it was kind of just how she tried to live, having had three boys with no money. Maybe it was circumstance that, have been a single parent, she just thought this was the way to go about things. I guess I wouldn't know. Not really asked her, Lesley, to be honest. I've not spoke to her for 10 years, so I've not asked her.
And I can understand that, absolutely. So why do you think you fought back against what your then partner, now wife, the way that she wanted the money side of the relationship to be run? Why do you think you had that rebellious streak?
Well, I know why, really, and this is through sort of personal development. I know that what you believe to be true is more powerful than anything else. And so when someone's challenging your beliefs, especially beliefs that you've been taught by your parents, why would you allow somebody to do that? That's how I previously thought. But as I got older and as I became more financially stable, I realized that actually you could challenge what your parents had done or said to you, and it wasn't true. And that journey, probably in the last 10 years of really looking at everything I believe to be true and saying, is this true, what I believe? Or is there someone that's had some influence on this being true? And were they a good influence? And I think when you kind of do that, and you only get to that, I personally believe you only get to that level of freedom to think like that when you're not under pressure with financial issues. Because when you're under financial issues, you can't see any of that stuff. Like, it's just a nice thing that other people have. So I think getting a job where I suddenly had an abundance of money and the freedom then to start looking at these things, that allowed me then to question what was going on and what my previous education was. And so probably that helped then my relationship with my wife, because at the start I was rebellious, but eventually I came around to actually you're right. Maybe if we want to stay at this house for more than 6 months, we should probably pay the bills, because otherwise it's going to lead to the same end result as it always does if you don't pay your bills.
And how long did it take you to change that mindset?
I would say it probably wasn't 10 years, but it was probably 3 to 5 years. And I think having children, we had children. Amy was 21, I was 23. My daughter's 16 now. So I think having children made me think, I can't bring children into this way of thinking. I mean, we still struggled. The first 4 years, I was not earning a lot of money. I'd tried businesses. I was doing like side hustles and all that kind of stuff. I had a IT repair business, which was like cash to the hand stuff, So I did all of those things to try and get by, really. So again, it probably didn't happen around that time until I got the well-paying job, and then it made more sense that, okay, I could pay stuff, I could probably get ahead of stuff sometimes. So probably 3 to 5 years, mid to late 20s, I guess.
And I think what you mentioned there with regards to, you need to have money in order to be able to have the awareness. It's very, very true that when you are caught up, with financial struggles, that you actually, the hormone cortisol is released. And when cortisol is released, fight or flight hormone, you are actually not able to become solution focused. You're not able to think of, how can I get myself out of this? Because cortisol blocks your ability to come up with a way of managing the situation that you are in. So the worst thing you can do is to continually drive that sense of panic, of feeling scared, of feeling the situation is hopeless, because all you're doing is constantly feeding your system, your nervous system, with cortisol. The very best thing you can do is to find a way to calm your nervous system down, to give yourself that ability to go, okay, this is the situation I am in. What can I do to change that situation? And for different people, how they do it, in terms of having an open conversation with a friend, reaching out and asking for support, educating yourself, whatever it might be, actually finding a way to reduce that cortisol is the only way to actually put yourself in a position to help yourself, basically.
Yeah, and that seems to happen subconsciously as well. I think for a lot of people, they're managing that subconscious pressure that they're under, and not externally facing up to it. And it's really funny because not funny at all, really, but I remember there was a teacher local to us who committed suicide. Jumped off this car park, and I was like, oh my God, this is horrific, this story that I heard. And then as it came out, it turned out he was in financial difficulty, and it was something ridiculous, like £10,000, something like that. And I was thinking, oh my God, how can this person have committed suicide for such a small amount of money? But actually, at that time when I heard the story and made that story up in my mind, I could say that because I was running a business and we had like VAT bills that were like that every 3 months. Like, this didn't seem like a lot of money. But I remember when my first daughter was born, I had a debt collector come to the house, and we owed, it was £100 council tax bill that the debt collector had turned into £600 by, levying the car and all this kind of stuff. And I had no idea that what he was doing was totally illegal. I managed to get away with it because we paid the £600. But I remember being on the phone to my wife's mum, crying because I needed to get this £600 out to drive to a house, take her to the bank and get the money so I could pay the bill. Because in the car that we had, which was worth 300 quid, of course they would never have taken the car that was worth 300 quid. Now, I know that now, but it had the baby seat in it, the car seat in for the kids, and so, like, I think about what you've just said about cortisol, and I think about how I emotionally felt at that time and how it feels for a lot of people, and I mean it particularly men, but I'm not discounting how it feels for women. I'm just talking about it really from my perspective. But for a lot of proud, ego-filled men that feel like they have to provide for their families, how that could just drive them over the edge, and so I hear that, and I really feel what you've just said deeply, because I wasn't aware that was the case from a hormone level, but I've definitely thinking about it now, I've got goosebumps because I can feel it in my memories of those feelings.
Yeah. And for anybody that is listening, that is, is feeling that sense at the moment of struggle because of, whatever's going on in the economy, whatever going on in their life, one way to calm the system down, which I think is relevant to mention now, is something I've only learnt about in the last 3 or 4 months: polyvagal breathing. Polyvagal breathing, you breathe in for the count of 5 and you breathe out to the count of 10. And you do that 5 or 6 times or so, and you actually physically feel your nervous system calming down. And when your nervous system calms down, when the cortisol leaves your body, that is when you can actually think, okay, this is the situation I am in. And this doesn't just refer to, money. This refers to anything that causes stress within your body, because stress means production of cortisol. If you start to develop polyvagal breathing as a coping mechanism, that allows you then to create that space where you can go, this is the situation I am in. What can I do to create a solution, to generate how I can get myself out of this? That can only happen when you have calmed your nervous system down. And I think a lot of people are understandably like you, Matt. What you don't know, you don't know. But when we are put under situations of deep stress, our body, going back to primitive times, a hairy mammoth chasing after us, we don't have the time to go, okay, then, so how do I work out how to run faster than this hairy mammoth? No, our body goes, shit, there's a big scary mammoth there. I need.
You better run.
Exactly.
Well, and I got into financial difficulty during lockdown. Actually, we ended up homeschooling my daughter, and the long story short is we got to about 40 grand of credit card debt, which we don't have now, but we did get to. And it was at the point where, when we were to do our GCSEs, we signed up for this college and it was going to cost us 4 grand for her GCSEs. She was being bullied. We didn't want to go down that road. So we said, yes, we'll do it. And I remember paying for those across 3 or 4 credit cards. It was like the last bit of money on each of the credit cards. I'm thinking, damn, what am I going to do here? Because we're in this debt. But I knew at that time that there was a route to pay it back, so it was a huge amount of money, really. But I knew there was a route that I had to pay it back. Whereas when I think about that £600 debt that I had, like, I couldn't see how I was going to get that money, and even how, I remember having to arrange to pay it off like over 6 or 12 months or something. Because the point is that, like, the actual amount is irrelevant. Like, I still understand the pressure, and even though I got this good job and lots of money coming in and stuff, I still felt that pressure at lockdown to solve that problem. And when you're hitting all the limits of your credit cards, if you have them even, that can feel very, very, very tough. But the other thing I'll say is what you just said about the breathing exercise. Like, again, 5 years ago, Lesley, if you'd have told me that, I'd have been like, what is this woman talking about? I'm never going to do anything like that. But all I can say to anybody that is sitting there with those same thoughts that I had is, having gone through personal development and looked at breathing, looked at tapping, EFT, all these weird and wonderful things that I thought were woo-woo, that made no difference, that were just these crazy women talking about this stuff.
Some men do as well.
Some men as well. Yeah. But in my world at the time, when I went networking, it was never the men that was talking about it. It was always the women. And now, obviously, my network is very different in that way. But it really works. Like, it really works. Some of the stuff that I do now to calm my nervous system, some of the stuff that I do now to get perspective, even things like journaling, some simple things like journaling. I don't do that a lot, but I've done it in the past, and it's helped bring perspective to what I'm, thinking about, how I'm grateful for certain things. All of that adds to the fact that if I look at Matt now and Matt 10 years ago, my stress levels are ridiculously low in comparison, whatever comes along, and we've had a lot of things come along in the last 10 years. So definitely, if you've got pessimistic view of this woo-woo stuff, it really does work, and it's really worth putting the time into.
And I think as well, a lot of people, as you said, don't believe in certain things because they sound too woo-woo. I'm not a spiritual person, therefore why would I want to do that? But actually, when you look for the evidence that it has worked for other people, you then give yourself a choice. Do I believe they are not telling the truth about how it's benefited them? Or do I maybe question why I have the opinion I have when I haven't actually tried that for myself? And what I love about you, and there's many things I love about you, but one thing in particular is you will put yourself in rooms where other men in particular will not put themselves. And very often that is rooms that are more traditionally full of women rather than full of men. Why do you do that?
Well, I mean, obviously I've said men and women quite often throughout this because we're talking about the story of my experience, right? And I'm really, and we've talked about this before as well, me and you, I don't think about men and women in the same way. I don't think we should segregate certain people in based on gender or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Or sex, I should say. And I see there's reasons why you would do that in certain circumstances. So I totally get that as well. But I also think that, and I think because of that view, then I want to go into the places where I potentially could be excluded and say, why am I being excluded from this place? What is it about this group of people that don't feel safe with a man in the room? What is it that I need to learn in order for them to help them feel so safe in the room with my presence? And so I'm really thankful and grateful that I have a lot of good people around me that allow me to go into those environments. I mean, a lot of them, we talked about, Lesley, and like they're not female-only events, but they might seem heavily female-based, maybe, but maybe it's the way they're marketed or whatever. But for me, I'm just like, okay, what can I learn here? What is going to help me with the people that I work with? What's going to help me with my life? What's going to help me as a better parent, as a partner? All of those things I'm constantly looking at because I have lots of baggage that I need to deal with myself. And how am I going to deal with that if I don't explore some of these things? So I think it's just about trying to understand more. And I'm sure most people my age will say, or with my experience will say, I should say, but there's a long way to go, like I'm still trying to figure all this stuff out. I still don't really know the answers to a lot of it. But I'm getting there. That, Be Inspired that we both went to was just fascinating for various reasons. But one of the best things I saw, and one of the things I've talked about my event with you, but one of the best things that Danny did at that event is she said right at the start to everybody, like, this room is inclusive. It doesn't matter what sex you are, religion you are, anything, all the things that you could be marginalized for. She just covered it all at the start and said, we are one group of people here and everybody needs to feel safe. And actually, I've been to 100 conferences, events, 100 plus, and I've never seen anybody make a space feel so safe and inclusive for everybody in the room as she did. And that's absolutely like one of the best lessons I learned from that event, amongst others, that's how we could make it like that for everybody. That's how we could include everybody in something and say, actually, when people do behave in a bad way at these kind of things, this is how we deal with them.
Absolutely. And you've just given me goosebumps talking about that, because I think, to sum it up almost in terms of what Danny said, this is Danny Wallace for anyone listening at the Be Inspired event. The one word that comes to mind is kindness. Yeah. And I think if everybody and I've talked about this desire previously, but if everybody was just 5% kinder, imagine the cumulative effect that would have locally, nationally, internationally. It would be
on themselves as well.
and on themselves as well. Because very often we know that people are unkind to others, not necessarily because of that other person. It's actually more a reflection of how they are feeling about themselves. So if we start from a position of being 5% kinder to us, that ripple effect would be absolutely massive. And I am so here for everything that you said there, because in that 2-day event, the spirit of generosity, of kindness, of support, of collaboration, of community, I could go on and on and on, because it started off by saying, we're inclusive, we are kind. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so lovely being reminded about that, actually. So lovely.
Yeah. And the other thing about it is that I never felt judged then after that point. And I'm, again, about being kind to yourself. I've been to some events before, largely like bro marketing events, and I just feel judged sometimes. And I think that makes the event feel worse as well. And so to be in a room where you don't feel like that, and it only occurred to me once we've been talking about it here, but that was good. That was really self-empowering. To be like that. So that's
absolutely.
Good. But bring it back to money. I think with the kindness stuff, like, it is so hard. I described even the situation recently during lockdown, and my previous scenarios, like, it's so I describe it as claustrophobic. Like, having financial issues can feel claustrophobic, and so you can push through, you can be kind, but the issues are still there. And so it's really important for you to deal with it face on, and not just put your head in the sand, because that it just has such a counterproductive, and like you say, if subconsciously you're producing cortisol with it as well, like, you're just going to be in a really tough spot.
Exactly. Absolutely.
But there's always a way out.
Yeah. And you are not in a position to help yourself at that point in time. So the way to help yourself is to reach out to somebody else, be that, a close friend, a professional person, whoever it might be, because actually the act of reaching out starts to calm down your nervous system, that starts to make you be able to be solution focused. And I think that is the really important thing, is to recognize when you are in that situation, if you cannot think, how can I help myself, to simply think, okay, I need to do the breathing, 5 in, 10 out, but actually reach out to somebody else, because that in itself, that will help to start to regulate your nervous system. And when you can talk to somebody else, when you can share that problem, it starts to lead to finding a solution, because there is always a solution. You're just not able to necessarily see it in that moment.
Yeah. And I would add to that just be careful about who you're reaching out to, because in my environment with my brothers and my mum, if I was to speak to those people about it, I think we probably would. It's like confirmation bias, right? Like, we would have probably said the same sort of answer. This is the solution. And it was a pretty bad solution. So there's plenty of places out on the internet, in the world, where you can get advice and support that will be good advice, because the last thing you want is for someone to say, oh yeah, okay, just move house, they'll chase you. You don't want that advice. There's better advice out there. And so I think just, if the answer that you're getting doesn't feel right, ask again to somebody else until you find the right person that gives you an answer that feels like a good, logical solution. Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really good advice. So what are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? What am I excited about? Well, I'm 40 a week today at the time of recording. So I'm excited about that, because I'm going to Vegas. Birthday. And thank you so much. Going on holiday. But I also have a video marketing conference that we're doing on May the 23rd next year, which I'm super excited about. We're going to bring some of the speakers from America. We're going to bring some of the best YouTubers and video marketing people in the UK together with some business owners, and we're going to have a great conference there. And I'm calling it a festival, because I love festivals, and it's called Tube Fest. So I'm trying to make it more like of a festival, because a festival sounds more exciting than a conference.
That's
So
true.
that's what we're going with. So that's what I'm so excited about at the moment.
And I think as well, people are still really, really enjoying the ability to get together in person.
100%.
Yeah. And the
100%.
energy from it is unbelievable. And seeing so much, when we met at Be Inspired, and I think we spoke about this, I don't know how huggy I was prior to lockdown. I've never been anti-hugs, but actually I don't think I was necessarily a massive hugging person. But after lockdown, my God, I just love to hug everybody and anybody, and be aware that not everybody, wants to be hugged. But I think it is that there is still that sense, isn't there, that we were locked up for 2 years. And now we are absolutely loving that sense of connection and collaboration.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was definitely a hugger before. I can't deny that. But I just being able to sit down and have a beer with somebody, or sit and talk about stuff that potentially your friends are not used to talking about, or not that comfortable talking about, and it might be business related or personal, or whatever. Like, just being in a room where we're all there for this shared purpose, and we can talk about marketing or whatever it is that you're there for. It's just great. Like, I've always said to my wife, I started going conferences probably when I was about 25, something like that. I've always said I just love it for the dinners and the conversation. There's just nowhere else like it, where you can really get to grips with a particular topic, whatever that might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you are rapidly moving towards a landmark birthday, this question springs to mind. So you are heading towards 40. So the last big landmark was our 18th, 21st birthday, or the first probably big landmark birthday. What would nearly 40-year-old Matt say to 18-year-old Matt if he could?
Oh God, Lesley, where could I start? Where could I start? Is this a sweary podcast? Can we?
Don't worry, we can have an explicit thing put on it. That's fine.
So, well, I'd say to 18-year-olds, stop being a dickhead, because really, when I was 18, I just felt like everything that I think about now as human beings, about kindness and about what I've learned in the personal development world. I think when I was 18, I was just against the world. And I know I've spoken to people about this, and they say the same sort of thing, but just didn't really give a shit about anybody else. And everything was against me. And as I've grown up, and, again, largely finance related, I think, I just realized actually, like, taking personal responsibility and knowing that you are responsible for your actions, and that other things just happen. They don't happen to you, and that you've always got a choice about how you react to them. I think if I could have just learnt that quicker, I think that would have made my 20s better. With that being said, I had a fantastic 20s, a fantastic 30s, and I wouldn't change them, because I wouldn't be where I am now. But yeah, I just wish I could have understood that a little bit sooner about, I think, personal responsibility, and the world is not out to get Matt. And if you feel like you're in that position now, listening to this, it's liberating to take personal responsibility for your own actions and the things that happen. And they just happen. Like, one of my friends, Susie, she says, and we used to do walk and talks on during lockdown. We couldn't walk with each other, and she was far away anyway. But we chat, and she said, "Matt, you just don't know what's in someone else's cup." And I just love that idea, because as an 18-year-old, you don't really care about other people's cups. But now I'm always conscious of that. If someone's angry with me, or upset with me, or says something, sorry, let me backtrack. If someone's angry or upset, I know it's not because of me. I know they're angry or upset about something. And if they direct that towards me, then I just ask them if they're okay. And I think the difference is, when I was 18, I'd have gone back at them and would have probably have had an argument or a fight or whatever it might have been. Whereas now I'm like, something's not right with this person. They're going through something. What is it I can say to help them? And I think that's where your point about if everyone was just a little bit more kind, you'd find that in a restaurant, you get served better when you ask the people. My daughter's started working a cafe, and she said, she's worked there 3 months. She said, do you know what she calls me, Matt? She says, Matt, listen, I've been working that place 3 months, and it's the first time yesterday that someone asked me how I was. She said, and it felt amazing. And she's come home and told me about it. Like, that's how important it is to the service industry, but any industry really, where someone just asks if they're okay.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference.
No, I totally agree. And along the same lines, what do you think 18-year-old Matt would say to nearly 40-year-old Matt?
You lucky sod. I mean, that's what he'd say. And I'd also think 18-year-old Matt would say thanks for putting in the effort and working hard, and doing the things that I didn't think I'd be able to do. I didn't think I would travel the world. I didn't think I'd start a business, multiple businesses. I never thought I'd earn 10 grand in a month or what other crazy months I've had. Like, none of those things were even possible in my mind at 18. And I think, yeah, I'd just say thanks. Yeah, that's it really.
I think he would say, well done, mate. You've done a great job.
Maybe,
yeah. That's actually brought tears to my eyes, you saying that, I have to say.
Yeah, well, I got a little bit emotional then. I'm like, I don't want to do this on a podcast.
I think it's the first time, and you are probably something like my 60th guest, something like that. It's the first time I've actually had tears in my eyes, because I think sometimes that's really powerful to do when you have that realization that the person you were is not the person you want to be, but you can you can look back and give advice, but also you can look forward from that position as an 18-year-old and congratulate yourself on how far you've come.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. Even 5 years ago, I think about the person I was 5 months ago. This one thing that I've spent a lot of time complaining about stuff I felt in the last couple of years, probably because of lockdown, maybe, I don't know. But I felt like I've turned a corner a little bit and started to ask myself, like, what is there to complain about? Like, maybe just focus on like the good stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm really hopeful about the next decade of stuff that's to come for me, and my family, and what we're going to achieve in the world together. Yeah, we'll just see. But I think just the personal growth is just so important more than anything else.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So how can people connect with you?
So I am the self-proclaimed king of video. So you can find me at kingofvideo.co.uk. Self-proclaimed because the domain name was available, so I took it and ran with it. And if you want to do any YouTube-y stuff, then you can also go to links.kingofvideo.co.uk, and there's some quick links on there to get you started. But thanks so much for this, Lesley. No. This has felt such a... I mean, I like talking, and I like talking about myself, of course. I'm sure you know that. But this has been really strangely cathartic to go through the history of my own financial stuff and get it out into the world. So I really appreciate you asking the questions and inviting me to the podcast.
No, and I appreciate you coming on, being so honest, sharing your experience, and anybody and I think everybody should reach out to you and connect with you. The details will be in the show notes. And just to say thank you very much, Matt, for your time. Thoroughly enjoyed this episode, and it's just been brilliant connecting with you. Thank you.